Welcome to Husband Talking. Explore riveting tales of infidelity with us. Please subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin.
I got out of bed with a head that felt like it was about to burst. Once I was in the bathroom, I quickly took 2 aspirin. My stomach felt like it was going to turn, so I leaned over the toilet for about 11 minutes. During that time, everything came back to me. My name is James Thompson, and when I got home from work yesterday, my caring wife, Emily, caught me off guard. She started by saying that she loved me, but then revealed that she had been seeing another man for the last 8 months and was in love with him as well. She described it as a simple act of kindness. The man, who she refused to name, had been in a terrible car accident, and his wife had died while he came away without a scratch. He felt extremely guilty about this. Emily said she just started out trying to help him with his emotional pain, and they had fallen in love. Yes, she admitted they had been intimate. Emily even confessed that sometimes the intimacy was very good. Throughout this entire awful conversation, she insisted that she loved me and would eventually come back to me. But as long as this man needed her, she would be there for him. She promised me that she would also be there for our kids and me. The man was much younger than her, and she knew that eventually he would move on, but for however long he needed her, she wanted to support him. This was about the worst nightmare any married man could walk into. Stunned, I did what just about any man would do. Accused my wife of being a 304 hooker. At that point, Emily unloaded on me. She told me she was totally disappointed in my reaction. Emily actually had the audacity to say to me that if I really loved her, I would accept the situation. She told me that in our wedding vows, I promised to love, honor, and cherish her. It was clear that Emily was disappointed and angry with me. I was beyond furious, and, to keep from hitting her, I started drinking and yelling. When I calmed down a little, I asked her how she would like it if I found another woman. Emily said, "Who would want you?" According to her, I was an overweight middle-aged man with thinning hair. She also warned me that if I tried to divorce her, she'd ruin me. I was beyond livid and totally at a loss as to what I could or should do at that moment. My brain was in total meltdown. I couldn't process anything logically. Perhaps not my finest moment, but I continued to drink and rage at Emily. She packed a bag and announced that she was leaving and would go to her lover until I could calm down and accept the situation. I didn't remember much after that. As I sat on my bed, our baby decided to take stock. Emily was right. I was middle-aged, my hair was thinning, and I had to admit that I was also about 25 pounds overweight. I couldn't do anything about being middle-aged, but I knew I could do something about the hair and the weight. But before I would do anything, I had to find out where my kids were. It was Sunday morning, so they should be here at home. A quick search of the house showed that they weren't. So, where the hell did Emily stash them? I was about to call her parents when I heard a car pull up in the driveway. When I looked out the window, it was Emily's car. I could see our kids getting out and heading toward the house. I met Emily at the front door. "Good. I see you're sober," she said with a snap to her voice. "Where were the kids?" I asked with a snap to my voice. "They were with me. I couldn't very well leave the kids with you. You didn't take them to your sex toys house, did you?" I hissed. "Dave, watch your language," she snapped once again. "They were already there," she said, as though that was absolutely natural. "My friend is a wonderfully kind person. You, on the other hand, were disgraceful yesterday." "Fair point about me," I admitted. "But why didn't you take the kids to your parents' place?" "They weren't home," Emily said as she breezed by me and went upstairs. I followed her into our bedroom. "Are you here to stay? Or are you going running back to your lover?" "Oh, please, Dave, stop being so childish. I told you how things are going to be. I have no intention of arguing with you about it. The discussion is over. Accept it or don't, it's your choice. Even though you're acting like an idiot, I still love you. And as I told you, when he no longer needs me, he'll be back full-time. So what do we do now?" I was fighting to keep my cool. "Right now, I'm going to pack a few things because I'm going to spend a few days with my friend until you finally cool down and accept the situation." "What about the kids?" I thought that might shame her into staying. "Didn't. If you don't want to watch them, call my parents. I'm sure they will." Emily then packed another bag of clothes and left. At this point, my head was ready to explode. However, I knew I had to keep it together for the kids. But I wasn't going to take Emily's affair lying down. No self-respecting man would. After Emily left, I checked on the kids and asked them if they had any homework. All three said they did. I told them to get on it right away. There was a lot of moaning and groaning until I informed them that when they were finished, we'd go over to Grandpa and Grandma's house. They're Emily's parents. The kids all cheered. They loved going there because Grandpa was helping all three of my kids build go-karts. They had been working on them off and on for several months. The carts had to be close to being finished. Emily's parents, Henry and Grace, lived on a small farm about 16 minutes away. They were both retired, and Henry just loved tinkering. In addition to doing a little farming, he loved to build and repair things. He had a very substantial workshop he used for all of his projects, and that's where they worked on the carts when time permitted. I would lend a hand. I'm a certified dealer mechanic for the local Honda dealership. It's the largest dealership in the Tri-County area. I wanted to talk to Emily's parents to see if they knew about her boyfriend and, more importantly, if they knew who he was. I also wanted to get their advice as to what I should do. I had always had a great relationship with them. Since my parents lived 3 states away, I considered Henry and Grace as my surrogate mother and father. However, I was a little apprehensive because I was afraid they would take Emily's side in this whole mess. That would totally destroy our relationship. I went room to room, checking that the kids were doing their homework, and they were. It was then that it struck me just how much my kids were my pride and joy. Daniel was the oldest, and he was 16. Only the close family called him Daniel. We started that to avoid confusion as to whether Emily was talking to her son or me. He was quite a football player but really wasn't big enough to get a scholarship to college. Sophia was a year younger and a typical teenager. She loved to push the boundaries but was a great student. Oliver, the baby, was only 11. He hated being called the baby, but Emily would still do it. Oliver was a happy accident. We weren't planning on having any more kids when Emily discovered she was pregnant. But Oliver had been such a happy-go-lucky child that he was a joy to have around. While the kids worked upstairs, I made myself a cup of coffee and started to make a list. I had a lot to do, and I didn't know how much time I'd have to do it. The first thing I did was to call my boss, Mark Johnson, and fill him in on my problem. I had worked for the dealership since it was founded 19 years ago, and Tom had been my boss for at least 12 years. If I do say so myself, I was one of the better mechanics at the dealership. Tom listened to my tale of woe and was very sympathetic, as his son had gone through a messy divorce a year before. It had gotten really nasty to the point where his son's ex-wife accused him of molesting their daughter. "Damn," I said. "That is one witch. Tell me about it," Tom said with evident bitterness. It was touch and go for about a week. We expected the police to arrest Brian at any minute. These are the kind of accusations that are devastating and almost impossible to disprove. The police run scared every time a woman starts pointing the finger at a man. The only thing that saved Brian was his ex-mother-in-law. When Michelle told her mother that Brian had molested her granddaughter, I think she thought that would be the final nail in Brian's coffin. Everyone knows Linda is ruthless. What I didn't know was that she has an equal share of fairness. She immediately took her granddaughter out of preschool and took her to her general practitioner. Linda had the doctor examine her granddaughter to determine if she had been molested. The doctor stated unequivocally that there was no way her granddaughter had been molested. Armed with that information, Linda marched over to the police department and told them if they pursued charges against Brian, she would testify against her daughter. Then Linda told Michelle that if she pursued this course of action, she would tell the court about her drug problems, and she'd lose her daughter. "God bless Linda," I said, somewhat shocked to learn what women are capable of doing to get their way. "Amen to that," Tom replied. "So if there is anything I can do to help you, let me know, Dave. If it's within my power to make it happen, I will." Since I had 11 personal days and 5 weeks of vacation time accrued, I asked for the following week off. Tom readily agreed, and in fact, he told me if I needed to take all of my personal days and my vacation together, he'd work it out for me. As it turned out, that is precisely what I did. "There is something else you can help me with," I explained. "I need the name of a good divorce lawyer if you know one." "That's easy," he said. "Use the attorney my son used." He cleaned Michelle's clock. Brian got primary custody of their daughter, gets to live in the house, and Michelle has to pay child support. His name is John Miller. I think I still have his number here somewhere. The messier my son's divorce got, the more we communicated through lawyers, and it got to where I started hearing Mr. Brown's name in my sleep. Tom took about a minute and finally found John Miller's card with the number. I called the attorney's office. I didn't expect anyone to be there on a Sunday but figured I'd leave a message. But luck was with me because not only was Mr. Brown there, but his secretary told me he had had a cancellation. He'd see me if I could make it to the office in 30 minutes. I told the kids that I had to go out for an hour or so and to behave. I then jumped in my car and made it to Mr. Brown's office in 25 minutes. John Miller appeared to be in his early or mid-30s. He was a good-looking man, a couple of inches shorter than me. He had deep blue eyes and a very welcoming smile. I had no doubt that Eric scored big points with the lady jurors. "What can I do for you today?" Eric asked after I had settled myself into a chair. "My wife told me yesterday that she is cheating on me with a younger man," I said, as I could feel my face flush with embarrassment and anger. I laid out as concisely as I could what had transpired the previous day. Eric sat taking notes as he shook his head. When I told him that my wife claimed to still love me but she was going to keep sleeping with the guy, he stopped me. "Let me get this straight." Eric's eyes had darkened a little. "Your wife says she loves you but is going to keep screwing this poor lost soul?" My face flushed big time with embarrassment. I just nodded. "Okay, go ahead," Eric prompted. I went on to say that Emily had gotten angry with me when I refused to go along with her plan. I also admitted that ID called her a 304 and a hooker. Painfully, I explained that Emily had laughed when I asked her how she would feel if I went out and got a woman. It was extremely painful and embarrassing to admit how Emily belittled me as a man and told me I'd never be able to find a woman that would want me. Not only that, but she promised she would ruin me if I tried to divorce her. "She actually said all that to you?" Eric asked in a voice that was filled with incredulity. "No offense, Mr. Wilson, but your wife is either one of the most callous persons ever, or she has some serious mental issues." "None taken," I sighed. "I think so myself." Then I explained how she had left the kids at her lover's house yesterday when we had our argument, and they spent the night there. Eric's head snapped up for a second, and he smiled. Then he put his head down and wrote something. "Okay, now for the 60,000 question, what do you want to do?" Eric asked as he looked up and steepled his fingers. I thought for a moment and then answered, "I can't live with the situation the way it is. I don't know if I can get past this, but for sure, I don't want to get destroyed in a divorce, and I don't want to lose my kids." Eric shook his head in sympathy. "That seems to be the new manner with women who are facing divorce because of their bad behavior. But rest assured, I'm going to bust my butt to limit any damage she can do to you. If you do divorce, you'll wind up with at least 50 of your joint assets. I will warn you that the courts don't give a tinker's damn about infidelity. So, I'm going to have to pay alimony and child support," I said, much deflated despite Eric's assurance. It seemed like I was going to be taken to the cleaners. "Yes, that is a possibility, but that's why we have to strike now and strike hard," Eric said as he studied his notes. "Right now, your wife has abandoned your marital house. And worse than that, she took your children to her lover's place and left them unattended. That's a big no-no with some of the courts. You currently have custody of your kids, and I think we can keep it that way. I'm going to try and get an emergency restraining order against your wife, which will allow you to remain in the house at least temporarily. And the longer you are there, the stronger your case gets for primary custody. If we can get that, you won't have to pay child support." "Does your wife work?" "Yes, part-time at the hospital. Emily works a shift on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays," I answered, and then a thought came to me which I voiced. "That's probably where she met this bozo." Eric agreed and then asked how much she made. I explained that she made about $25,000 a year. I, on the other hand, made about $80,000. "I have to ask a crucial question, and I want you to think hard about it," Eric said as he looked directly at me. "Do you still love her? Do you want to try to work things out?" I put my head down and stared at the floor for a long time. When I looked up, I couldn't help it, tears were streaming down my face. I nodded but then added, "I do love her, but I can't accept the situation as it is. She demeaned her husband and broke her vows. I am done with her. I just want a divorce." "Last question." Eric turned the sheet of paper on his pad to expose a clean one. "As best you can, tell me what assets you guys have." I thought for a moment as I mentally ran down what assets we had. Then I explained, as a rough estimation, we had about $3,000 in our checking account. Also, we had $45,000 in a savings account and a CD worth $260,000 plus interest. I also explained that I had about $145,000 in my 401k. Emily had slightly less accumulated in a retirement plan from when she worked full-time at the hospital. Even though she hadn't worked as long as I had, I explained that the hospital benefits package was generally better than mine. However, surprisingly, my company offered a better healthcare plan, so we used that for the family. I thought for a moment and then mentioned that we had 2 cars which were in both our names. We, of course, had our house. However, we only bought this particular house a few years ago and had maxed out the loan. There wasn't much equity in it. Okay, hey Race, what I want you to do. Eric looked like a man ready to go into battle. The first thing is for you to go draw out 1/2 of what you have in savings, checking, and the CD. Then I want you to put that money into a separate account in your name only. I can't do anything with the CD because it's in both our names, I explained. I can't cash that in without Emily's signature. No problem, Eric said as he began running numbers on his calculator. Take $25,000 out of the savings account, then pay as many bills for your house as you can from the checking account. Cancel any joint credit cards you have and use the joint checking account to pay them off. Then apply for a new credit card in your name only. I still have a credit card that I got before we were married, I said. However, I don't use it much because our joint card gives us money back. Even better, Eric smiled. You won't have to apply for a new card. Eric quickly scribbled onto a notepad a list of instructions and handed it to me. Right now, I want you to go out to my secretary and tell her to call Taylor Locksmith for you. You give them the address and have all the locks changed in your house. Then come back in here, and he'll fill you in on our next steps. Miss Carlson had Taylor Locksmith on the phone quickly, and I gave them the address and was told they'd be out around noon. I then went back into John Miller's office. Eric was just getting off the phone when I sat down. We're in luck. According to the clerk, if I fax my paperwork in today, we'll be assigned Judge Davis. Why is that lucky? I asked, confused. He hates cheaters, Eric answered with a smile. He's an old-fashioned Bible Belt judge, and he hates spouses that cheat, be they men or be they women. Trust me, that works big in our favor. If he hadn't been available, I probably would have had to do a little more tap dancing, but I'm sure we would have gotten what we want. However, Judge Davis was a good friend of my father's. I know for sure he won't be pissed if I call him at home. Eric stood up at that point and offered me his hand. I shook it gratefully. Before you head home, Eric instructed me, I want you to head out and get your bank stuff done. I'm going to prepare a petition for an emergency restraining order on your wife. She won't be permitted in your house or within 500 feet of you or your children. She's currently staying with her lover, and we know she's left your kids with him. That should help greatly with the restraining order. Weeks or months down the road, the order might be kicked out, but by then you should be firmly established in the family residence as the primary caregiver. By Saturday, you'll have your wife served with divorce papers. Then we're going to have to sit back and see what your wife wants to do. For the first time since Emily had laid her little bomb on me, I felt like I had taken back my life and part of my dignity. The bank wasn't particularly busy, so I was able to get a cashier's check quickly for my share of the money and close our one joint credit card. They told me there was a balance of $500 on it. I paid the balance off from the checking account. Then I paid the mortgage 2 months ahead. That took up another $2,250. There wasn't much left in the checking account. With a cashier's check in hand, I went down the street to another bank and opened up a checking and savings account in my name only. With that done, I headed back home. When I got there, I found the kids watching television, so I loaded them into the car. When we rolled up to my in-laws, I saw Henry coming around the corner of his house from his workshop. He waved and headed back around the house. The kids piled out and headed after their grandfather. Once inside, Grace greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. A minute later, Henry came in, and after washing his hands, he came out to greet me. I'm sorry I have to tell you this. I apologized immediately. This is hard for me to say. I took a deep breath and continued. Emily is having an affair, and am filing for a divorce. I don't believe you, Henry said sharply. Emily isn't the type of woman. What proof do you have? She told me. I said softly as tears started to slide down my face. At that point, the back door opened, and the kids came trooping in. Please stay outside for a few minutes, I told the children. Why? Daniel asked. Because I'm telling you to, I said more sharply than I meant to. At that point, Daniel saw the tears on my face, and he turned immediately, pushing his siblings back out the door. She told you? Grace asked in disbelief. Yes, I said firmly. and a whole lot more. I then recounted the story of the previous evening, including the part where she was having sex, and it was good. Also, I told them about how she said to me if I divorced her, she'd ruin me. And finally, I recounted how she didn't think any other woman would want me. They were shocked, and Henry was angry. I still don't believe it. I'm going to call her and put the call on speakerphone. After dialing his daughter's number and activating the speaker, Henry put the phone on the coffee table. "Hey, Daddy," Emily answered brightly. "What can I do for you?" "Dave is here right now," Henry said, and immediately asked the question, "Are you having an affair?" There was a long pause. Then Emily demanded, "What did he say?" "He said you were having sex with another man and that you were in love with this guy." "It's complicated, Daddy," she pleaded. "I'm trying to help this man. He suffered a terrible tragedy, and I'm trying to help him." Henry's face got bright red, and through gritted teeth, he asked, "Are you having sex with him or not?" "We've had sex, but I still love Dave. I just can't abandon this man right now. I love him also." I was totally stunned by Emily's father. She had always been a daddy's girl, and I just assumed that Henry would make excuses for her. "Emily," Henry's voice was a bit strangled at this point. "I never thought my daughter would ever become an immoral woman." "Daddy, please," was all that was heard as Henry pushed the disconnect button. A moment or two later, the phone began to ring again, and Grace went to answer it. "Leave it alone," Henry commanded, but Grace snatched it up and tried to answer anyway. Henry grabbed the phone out of her hand and threw it against the fireplace. "I said leave it alone," he screamed at his wife. She was totally shocked by her husband's anger and backed up. I was even more shocked. Dead silence filled the room as Henry and Grace were trying to process what they had just learned. Finally, Henry came over to me and hugged me. "Dave, I am so sorry. I don't even know what to say. I can't believe our daughter has done this to you. Anything that we can do to help you, we will. And I mean anything at all. We will be there for you and the kids. You'll have Grace talk to our daughter later and let you know how that comes out. Right now, I'm too angry to talk to her." After that, I had to leave so I could get back to the house for the locksmith. After herding the kids into my car, I hugged Henry and Grace and invited them for dinner where we could talk more about my problem. On the way home, Sophia burst into tears. "Are you and Mom getting a divorce?" "Where did you hear that?" I demanded. "From me," Daniel said defiantly. I snuck back into the house and listened. I figured it was something bad. I just didn't figure it was that. I sighed and realized they had a right to know what was going on. But then the question was how to tell my kids about their mother without causing too much damage. Damn Emily. Her selfishness was hurting the kids. I bet she never thought about that when she was climbing into bed with her new man. "Unfortunately, it seems that your mother and I will be getting a divorce," I said softly. "But why?" Oliver asked as he started to cry. "Your mother has fallen in love with another man," I said simply. "You mean she's having sex with another man?" Sophia said between her tears. "I hate her. She's a total witch." "Sophia, don't say that about your mother," I admonished my daughter, but my words were hollow, as those were my exact feelings right now. The locks were changed, and none too soon. 10 minutes after the locksmithman left, Emily came roaring into the driveway. "You had to tell my parents, didn't you? I'm sure that you told them that I'm a 304 and a hooker." Emily screamed. "I thought you loved me, Emily," I said sadly. "I do love you with all my heart, but I will never accept that you're going to be screwing some other guy. And you have no idea how much you hurt me when you told me that I was just an ugly middle-aged guy that no other woman would ever want to be with. In essence, you told me you're doing me a favor by staying with me. Your pity love I can do without. Not only did you do that, but you threatened to ruin me, yet you dare to tell me you love me? You really need to take a good hard look at yourself, Emily. People who love each other don't do things like that. As for telling your parents, if you're so convinced that what you're doing is right, then it shouldn't matter that your parents know." Emily looked stricken after I laid my accusations on her. "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say those things," she tried to apologize. "I was just angry at the moment because you called me a 304 and a hooker." "Truly, Dave, to call your wife and the mother of your children those names? You promised to love, honor, and cherish me. Shame on you. If you truly loved me, you would accept the situation. I'm not leaving you for him. I just love him also, and am trying to help him. He's much younger than me and will eventually move on." "Emily," I said, shaking my head slowly, "if you're going to quote our wedding vows, you should include the part where you promise to forsake all others. And to remind you that a married woman does not go out opening her legs for young men just because their bowing hurt. Besides, I have accepted the situation that you were damaged goods, and I am not going to have you in my life anymore. Like you said, accepted I knew they would take her on full-time. There was always a shortage of nurses, and she was an excellent nurse. Sometime after the hearing, the DNA results arrived in the mail. It took me almost half a day to get up the courage to open the envelope. When I finally did open it and read the report, my heart was filled with pure happiness for the first time since this mess had started. My kids were truly mine. I reread the report several times to reassure myself that it indeed confirmed that I was the biological father to my kids. Then I wondered what I would have done if the report had said that one or all of my kids weren't mine. In an instant of clarity, I realized that I would love them the same no matter what. I even thought that, for the sake of my kids, would I be willing to forgive all if Emily would just leave that man and come home? The answer was no. She would never be able to put proper values in my kids. She was a bad influence, and I needed to keep her away from them. I used up all of my personal days and my vacation time so I could stay home with the kids. When that ran out, thankfully, Emily's parents were willing to watch them. Henry and Grace were still refusing to talk to their daughter until she came to her senses. Henry said she called 3 or 4 times a day for about a week. Then Henry blocked her number. The visitation schedule was left up to Emily and me to work out. Actually, that meant that our attorneys would communicate what we wanted. Finally, it was agreed that Emily could visit Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday between 6 and 7 in the evening. Grace volunteered to supervise. However, I insisted that I be there for the first visit. I wanted Emily and Grace to know precisely what the rules would be. On the first Tuesday, a car parked in the street, and Emily got out. I didn't recognize the car but quickly realized that it must be her lover's car. Emily walked up to the house nervously and smiled tentatively at us both. "Hello, Dave. How are you, Mother? It's good to see you." "Emily, you have to leave," I snapped at her. "The judge told you that your lover wasn't allowed within 500 feet of this house." Horror spread over her face. But he was just dropping me off." "Emily, are you brain dead or what?" I was furious. The judge was quite Clarno lover here. "Tell that a holy to leave now, and I won't tell the judge." Emily nodded her head quickly and started back toward the car. Then a thought struck me. I walked out at an angle and pulled a pen from my pocket. As Emily was talking to her lover, I copied the license plate number down. Then I returned to the porch as the car drove off. "Okay, he said that he'll come back and pick me up." Emily was now defiant. "Well, tell him to meet you down the street because I don't want him anywhere near the house." Emily's face filled with anger. "Dave, I'm really getting tired of how you're treating me. You didn't have to steal the money from our checking account or cancel my credit card." "Emily, I didn't steal anything. The money that was taken from the checking account was used to pay off the credit card and then 2 mortgage payments. I wanted to be sure the kids had a place to stay while we sorted our situation out. As to canceling the credit card, I didn't want to be stuck with any expenses you might charge while you're running around with your lover." Emily's face flushed red with, I assumed, anger and arrogance. "This is not an affair, and he isn't my lover, Dave. You're being an unholy." Before I could say anything, Grace stepped forward and slapped Emily across the face. I was as stunned as Emily. Emily stepped back and stared at her mother. "Mother?" Bewildered? "Emily, if you ever disrespect Dave again, I will tear that dress off you and beat your bum red. Now, if you want to see the kids, they're in the living room. I want a word with Dave and then he'll be in. But be forewarned, if you do or say anything wrong, I will bodily throw you out of this house." Emily nodded meekly and went inside. "Dave, I apologize for my brain-dead daughter," Grace said sympathetically. "Thanks for sticking up for me," I said with real gratitude, and then I left. 2 weeks after that first hearing, as Eric had mentioned, the restraining order was lifted. But by that time, I had established that I was the primary caregiver, and I was allowed to stay in the house. Since Emily was still seeing her lover, Emily's child support remained, but she now could have unsupervised visits with the children in public. However, the judge admonished her that she couldn't take them to her lover's house, and he couldn't be with her when she had the kids. After 4 months of delay, our first real day in court to finalize the divorce came up. Before either of our attorneys could say a word, Judge Davis asked if Emily or I had been to any counseling. The two attorneys admitted that there had been none. So the judge requested 8 sessions of marital counseling. Neither Emily nor I opposed the sessions. For me, I thought they were a waste of time, but I didn't want to piss off the judge. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel that Emily still believed that she could convince me, or maybe the therapist, that what she was doing was right. The first meeting with the therapist, Dr. Roberts, proved to be precisely what I thought it would be. Emily spent most of the hour trying to explain that what she was doing was the right thing. I thought the therapist was going to swallow her eye teeth the first time Emily launched into her explanation. I believe it was Emily's arrogance that truly shocked Dr. Roberts. In the second week, Dr. Roberts began gently probing Emily's arguments. She asked if she thought it would be fair if I went out and started having sex with a woman. I cringed, waiting for the attack on my manhood, but this time it wasn't going to fly. Emily didn't answer right away, but I didn't care what she said. During the months that the divorce had dragged on, I had made some changes. I know it sounds vain, but when you've been told by the woman you love that you aren't good enough, you desperately want to prove her wrong. So I took the plunge and had hair transplant surgery. I didn't require a lot of it, but it still cost about $4,000. I was really back and forth about whether to have the hair procedure. I didn't know if I wanted to put up with the teasing. However, I was still using my vacation time, so I went for it. As near as I understood the procedure, my hair was buzzcut. Then plugs were pulled out of the back of my head and planted in the front. I pretty much stayed in the house for the first week. My kids didn't know what to make of me and asked a bunch of questions. I just told them that it was a minor medical procedure. After about 11 days, I looked pretty much like my old self, and each week after that, the hair got longer and longer. After the procedure was mostly healed, I started an exercise routine. I also started to run. At first, I could only go about half a mile before I felt like my lungs would explode and my legs would collapse out from under me. Eventually, I got up to where I could run 11 miles. I also joined a gym. I changed the lunch and supper menu in our house so that we were all eating healthier. The kids groaned at first because I cut out the fast foods, cookies, ice cream, pizza, and many other junk foods. However, I did some searching on the internet and found some fun foods to cook. They loved it when I surprised them with something new that also tasted great. Some of the concoctions didn't turn out so great, but we laughed about those, scrapped them into the garbage, and made sandwiches. As it turned out, my kids loved helping me in the kitchen. It became a real family thing. Aside from the pain that still burned in my heart because of Emily's betrayal, I was beginning to feel better and better about myself. In fact, the first day back at work, I got a real ego boost. I checked in at the office to see what they had scheduled for me, and the receptionist, Carla, welcomed me back with a strange look. I thought she was going to give me grief about my new hair, but she didn't. "Welcome back, Dave," she chirped, and then her eyes started studying me. "There's something different about you." I blushed a little. "Oh, I've been on a diet. I've lost 19 pounds. I want to lose maybe another 5. She laughed and nodded. "Well, it really suits you. If I wasn't married, I'd be all over you." Thanks for the ego boost, but according to my wife, I'm just a middle-aged man with no sex appeal, so much so she's found herself a lover. I tried to make a joke out of it, but it came out flat. By now, everyone in the company knew about my plight. Storm clouds crossed over Carla's eyes. "Emily is an idiot. Either that or she has a screw loose. You're a great guy, Dave, and there are plenty of women out there who would be thrilled to have you. Don't let Emily get in your head." That was the best shot in the arm I had gotten in months. Suddenly, I didn't feel like such a loser. Dr. Roberts asked my wife again, "Emily, how would you feel if Dave had come home and told you that he was sleeping with another woman?" As I mentioned, I was waiting for Emily to attack my manhood, but she didn't. I did see her eyeing me during our first meeting. I guess she could no longer say that I had thinning hair and was overweight. That was another boost to my ego. Anyway, I just sat in my chair and waited as Emily seemed to be thinking about what to say. She couldn't very well say that I couldn't have another woman if she had another man. I guess if he was trying to help that woman get over some tragedy, she said with arrogance, I would be okay with it. What if he told you that he loved this woman and that the sex was very good? Again, I would accept it, Emily insisted. However, he would have to assure me that the children and I would be taken care of. The session continued on like that, with Dr. Roberts trying to get Emily to see that her position was really ridiculous. But Emily refused to budge. As I feared, these sessions were just a waste of time. Emily was just going to use them to try to convince me that she was right. That was never going to happen, and as it was, the initial shock of what Emily was doing had begun to wear off. It's a funny thing about love: if it isn't nurtured, it begins to die. By the third week, something had changed. Emily came into the session much subdued and said little. Mostly she just listened. Whatever had changed, it had set Emily back a bit. Maybe she wasn't as arrogant now because Dr. Roberts was calmly and compassionately challenging her entire premise at every point. I also saw Emily checking me out when she didn't think I'd notice. I continued to work out and lost a few more pounds. I'd even begun doing a lot of work in the yard, which had given me a great tan. A couple of months before the therapy sessions had been ordered, I made another change. I was becoming dissatisfied with my job. Oh, I loved fixing cars, and not just the engines. I got tremendous satisfaction doing bodywork. I had been fixing old cars up since I was 14 years old. I could do it all. Now, I saw owning my own business as a means to being able to spend more time with my kids. I talked it over with Henry, and he agreed to help me. I wanted to set up my own shop and start building a business, but I couldn't just quit my job and do it. I didn't have the money to carry me until the business would sustain us. We'd starve before I could make a go of it. However, since Henry's farm was also in an industrial zone, he agreed to let me start my business in his workshop. Actually, Henry's tinkering shop had once been a barn for horses that he had converted. There was plenty of space for Henry and me. If I got the business established, Henry agreed to lease me a piece of land on the road to build my own building. I spent time at work studying how they had things set up. The dealership was basically set up to handle a higher volume than I was anticipating. They did a little body work at the dealership location, but much of it was subbed out. With this in mind, I scaled down what I needed in terms of tools and equipment. One thing for sure, I needed to build a paint booth. Henry was not only okay with that, but actually helped me construct it. I spent the savings I had liberated from our joint savings plus a small loan from Henry to finance the venture. I started part-time, mostly on the weekends and evenings. It was fun, and the kids would come out many times to watch or even help. I really enjoyed teaching Daniel how to do things. Even Sophia got her hands dirty and loved to tell her girlfriends how she helped change out an engine or helped paint a Corvette. That also made her more interesting to the boys at school. I got business by word of mouth, and soon I was wondering if I shouldn't strike out full-time. That decision actually came to a head when I was told that they needed me to work over the weekend to get some backup workout. I couldn't do it because I had customers of my own that I needed to take care of. I figured I was going to get fired when I went in to tell Tom that I couldn't work because I had my own business obligations. "Got a minute, Tom?" I asked as I stuck my head into his office. "Sure, Dave," he waved me in. "I'm glad you're working this weekend. We've got 44 cars coming in this Saturday that have been sold and need to be gone over from top to bottom. We have to get them out by the end of the month." I winced a little when he told me that. Most people don't realize that the factories have special incentives for dealerships. If they sell a certain number of cars in a month, they get a discount off the invoice. For instance, the factory could say if you sell 300 vehicles this month, well, take 160 off your cost. That's a $45,000 saving. That money is in the owner's pocket, but if the dealer only sells 299, they get nothing. This was a big deal to the dealership. "That's just it, Tom," I said, and could immediately feel the sweat dripping down my back. "I can't work this weekend. I sort of have started my own business on weekends, and I've got stuff I need to get done." "I'm sorry, Dave," Tom said curtly, "but if you can't work this weekend, I may have to let you go." "I understand, Tom," I said with resignation. "I just hope there are no hard feelings. I have been trying to build up a business of my own. I want to spend more time with my kids and make a little extra money for their college funds. They'll clean out my locker." "I hate to lose you, Dave," Tom said sadly. "Tell me about your business. Where are you located and what kind of jobs are you doing?" I explained that I had set up my operation on my father-in-law's property and told him what equipment and tools I had. Actually, I was set up to do just about any kind of car repair, including bodywork. "Go get yourself a cup of coffee, and then come back here," Tom said as he reached for his phone. I didn't want any coffee, so I went to my locker and put all my stuff in a box. Losing this job meant that it was going to be slim pickings for a bit. The kids would have to be put on Emily's health insurance plan, as I had taken her off mine. Still, I was confident that I could make it. I was turning away almost as much business as I was taking in. Tom motioned me into his office when he saw me coming down the hall. "I've got a deal for you, Dave," he said excitedly. "If you will work this weekend, we'll reimburse you for any money you lose because your customers are unhappy." No, I shook my head. I couldn't do that to my customers. "Dave, hold your horses. I'm not done," Tom said as he slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an independent contractor's agreement. "I really need you this weekend. I also think you can convince your customers to wait a few days. If you can do that and your shop passes our inspection, we'll hire you as an independent contractor to do some of our bodywork." I was stunned but took the deal. After that weekend, I was basically working full-time at my business. Occasionally, I would go into the dealership if they had a problem and I wasn't busy. Also, Henry started helping me part-time and Grace agreed to do my books. I was now making more money than I ever had working for the dealership. The only thing that was still screwed up in my life was my marriage. After the 4th counseling session, I wanted to put an end to them. I was pretty much beyond caring what Emily was doing with her new love. Oh, don't get me wrong. It still stung when I would stop and think about the fact that my wife was with another man. But I wasn't stopping to think about it as often. It was in our 5th session that I decided I was going on the offensive. I figured if I attacked Emily hard enough, she might choose to put an end to these wasteful sessions. I decided to confront her on the most hurtful thing that she had said to Medhat. I was basically too ugly to attract another woman. When Dr. Roberts asked if I had anything to say, I leaned into Emily. "Emily, I've decided that you are not only a totally selfish person, but you're basically a very nasty person," I said with venom. "How dare you tell the man you supposedly love that he is an ugly middle-aged man who no woman would ever want? You hurt me in a way that I don't think you'll ever get over." "Oh God, Dave, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so ashamed that I ever said that. If I could take it back, I would. I do love you, just not enough to give up your lover and keep your sorrows to yourself. You'll need them more than I do." I snapped back. Emily burst into uncontrollable sobbing. No matter what Dr. Roberts or I said, we couldn't calm Emily down. Eventually, Dr. Roberts called an end to the session but gave us homework to do before our next one. I wasn't looking forward to it because, by now, I figured these sessions were absolutely a total waste of time. The homework was simply to answer a series of questions. Some of them I understood, like how is our relationship with our parents, how was our sex life. Some of the questions didn't make any sense to me, like what my favorite food and drink were, what kind of vehicle did I drive. But the one question really caused me to sit back and think it was, if I could change one thing, what would it be? I had been working on this questionnaire the night after that last session, but I put it away after I read that question. I wanted to think about that one for a bit. The next day, I finally wrote that I wished I had been a better husband so my wife wouldn't have stopped loving me. We turned the papers in at our next session, but Dr. Roberts didn't even look at them. Instead, she started by asking if we had any questions or if there was something that we'd like to discuss. "I'd like to ask Emily a question," I said immediately. Dr. Roberts nodded at me, and I turned to face my estranged wife. "Emily, I don't see that we're getting anywhere with these sessions. You've made it consistently clear that you're not going to leave your friend Alex Carter, and that leaves no chance for reconciliation. Why don't we just stop this and get the divorce done?" "How do you know his name?" Emily asked in shock. "That first time you came over to visit the kids, I got his license number. After that, it wasn't hard to find out his name. But it doesn't really matter. I have no interest in getting back at him or even talking to him. I just don't care anymore. I want to move on." Emily looked up at me with the saddest eyes I think I've ever seen. I hated seeing her in pain, and I wanted to go over and hug her, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. So I continued, "I know your lawyer hasn't been happy with the settlement I've offered so far. Well, I've told my attorney to offer some alternatives. I'm willing to give you more visitation with the kids. I'm also offering to pay you $900 a month in alimony for 3 years. I just want you out at any cost." I watched Emily for a reaction, but all I saw was just a terrible sadness. She had made it perfectly clear to me that she wasn't going to stop seeing the guy, and I couldn't and wouldn't accept my wife having sex with another man. For the life of me, I just didn't understand how she could possibly think that I would live with a situation like that. At this point, it didn't matter. I just wanted out. I decided to push to end this farce. "I know that what you said about me was partially true. It did hurt like hell when you said it, and I did tell you that I didn't think I'd ever get over that. But as time goes on, I realize that I am getting over it. Anyway, as you can see, I've tried to fix myself up. I don't think that I'm the man you thought so little of when you took up with Mike. I've also started dating. After we divorce, you can take care of your gentleman friend for as long as you want, but I think it's time to end this, if for no other reason than so you can start to rebuild a relationship with your kids. With that, Emily burst into tears and fled the room. Dr. Roberts looked as stunned as I was. Finally, she composed herself and told me that she wanted to see Emily by herself for the next session and then me alone for the last session. With a sigh, I agreed. When Emily unloaded all this on me, I was furious and filled with hate. But now, months after the fact, I was just worn out. I could see the pain this whole thing was inflicting on not only me but Emily, her parents, and most of all, our children. I wanted that to stop. I also was no longer furious that Emily was having sex with some guy. When I arrived for my final meeting with Dr. Roberts, I was not only happy that Emily wasn't there but also glad that this would be the end of the counseling. Dave, I want to commend you for your restraint through all these sessions. Dr. Roberts began. I know this entire situation has been unbelievably painful for you. After meeting with Emily last week, I think I finally understand what happened to your wife. I was now sitting on the edge of my chair. Finally, maybe I'd learn why Emily decided to destroy our marriage. Do you remember the homework I gave you? She asked. I just nodded. I had forgotten about it and figured that it had been of little value in these counseling sessions. The way you both answered one particular question surprised me, Dr. Roberts said as she pulled 2 pieces of paper from her folder. The question was, if you could change one thing, what would it be? Do you remember that? I nodded. You answered that you wished you could have been a better husband so that your wife wouldn't have stopped loving you. When Emily heard that, she broke down and cried harder than ever. Took me quite a while to calm her down. I didn't know what to think, say or do, so I just sat there. Dave, your wife never stopped loving you. Yeah, that's why she continues sleeping with Mike, because she loved me so much. Dr. Roberts gave me a disapproving look but then sighed. Dave, what I discovered about Emily was that she was going through a severe midlife crisis. As the children were getting older, Emily felt her life slipping away from her. She is, and I suspect she has always been, a warm and caring person. Somewhere along the line, she found Mike, who needed her terribly. She confused her desire to be young again and Mike's terrible need for forgiveness over his wife's death for love. That doesn't change anything, I protested. She's still sleeping with Mike. Actually, no, she's not, Dave. Really? This was news to me. Then why didn't Emily tell me? I know this isn't going to change your feeling at this point, but you need to know the whole truth. Mike left town the same day that you told Emily that you were going to start dating and you just wanted to get on with the divorce. She figured that she had already lost you. I thought about that, but Dr. Roberts was right, it didn't change my mind. There had been too much said and done to go back. I had my life on track now, and I wanted to move forward. I would never be able to trust Emily again, and I didn't want to live like that. But aside from anything else, I wanted it so the kids could hopefully start bonding with their mother again. Sophia's grades had slipped badly since this whole mess had started, and I was sure that she was still angry at her mother. Oliver had become sullen and withdrawn and was acting out in school. This was perhaps the worst consequence of Emily's actions. Oliver was no longer that happy-go-lucky kid. Daniel was handling it the best of all. He wasn't angry or sullen, but anytime his mother's name came up in a conversation, he changed the subject. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps his reaction is worse than the 2 girls. I just don't know. One last thing, Dr. Roberts said as she pulled out the second piece of paper. This is Emily's answer to the question about changing one thing. She wrote if she could change one thing, it would be that she never met Alex Carter. The divorce went through, and as per the agreement, Emily used to visit the kids on Thursdays and Saturdays. I made sure I'd take the kids out on Saturday for dinner before Emily arrived. At first, our interaction was very formal and awkward, but then we started sharing a meal or 2 together with the kids. And then one evening, Emily asked me if she could stay the night. No, I answered with a chuckle. The bed in the spare room isn't all that comfortable. It's better if you just go back to your place. And next time, never think that I would be in the same room alone with you. As for Alex Carter, his story checks out to be not completely true. His wife died when she was driving away from him. She found him cheating on her, and she left in a rage. She was speeding and died in a car crash. Why did he leave town? I guess it was due to a severe beating that he took outside a local bar. 5 broken ribs, 1 busted kneecap, 5 missing teeth, and 2 busted nuts. I had to call in a favor with some friends. It was worth it. The beating will ensure that he is never going to be with any other woman, let alone please any. As for Emily, little by little, she was able to restore a loving relationship with her children. Or I should say that she restored a loving relationship with Sophia and Oliver. No matter what Emily did, there always seemed to be a distance between her and Daniel. I would have thought that Sophia would be the one to hold a grudge, but she was the first to fully embrace the return of her mother. Emily finally mended her fences with her parents. However, like Daniel, there was a slight coolness with her father. Anyway, most Sundays we would have dinner there like a family, but we weren't. Emily kept telling me how sorry she was for everything that had happened. I finally told her to please stop. I will never forgive her, and it's useless to try. Just to add on, I told her, "Oh please Emily, stop being so childish. I told you how things are going to be. I have no intention of arguing with you about it. The discussion is over. Accept it or don't, that's your choice. We are never getting back together again. Even if you were the last woman on the planet and the fate of mankind depended on me making love to you, it'll pass." 3 years later, I got married. I married Sophia's teacher, and it was amazing how we met and how it all went down. It is a story for a different time, but what matters is that the kids love her and have accepted her as part of the family. Emily has still not accepted the fact that I have moved on. Well, I am not going to do anything about her. After all, the discussion was over. She either accepts it or she does not. Thanks for watching. Could you forgive in this situation? Or is trust gone for good? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.